Delegates seek ways to hit global climate targets as the COP29 summit opens in Azerbaijan.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has arrived in Paris to join French President Macron for an armistice ceremony. Several people have been killed and dozens injured in Russian strikes on the Ukrainian cities of Mykolaiv and Zaporizhzhia. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has arrived in Paris to join French President Emmanuel Macron for a ceremony marking the 106th anniversary of the armistice. Their meeting signifies a celebration of the two countries' friendship as nations across the world pay tribute to their fallen soldiers in World War I. This year also marks the 120th anniversary of the Entente Cordiale, the historic agreement between France and the United Kingdom. Starmer was personally invited to Paris by Emmanuel Macron, and the two leaders are expected to discuss a number of foreign policy issues, including the war in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East. The trip marks a significant step in Starmer's plans to reset relations with the European Union following the UK's exit in 2020.
COP29 kicks off in Baku on Monday. Delegates from around the world have gathered here, hoping to find ways to prevent global temperatures from rising and to keep the promises made under the Paris Agreement. But what should we expect from the biggest event of the year to address the climate crisis? The summit is being called the Finance COP, as countries will, for the first time in 15 years, review the scope and structure of financing for developing nations to support climate action. Countries are also encouraged to lay the groundwork for stronger national plans to curb emissions. Turning ambition into action remains a top priority on the COP presidency agenda. But how can this goal be achieved? We put that question to the COP29 president.
We need to consolidate all the efforts of all countries, because it's only with consolidation, with the good motivation for all the participants, we have the chance to have a success. I think the main role for Baku COP, for Azerbaijan, for COP29 team, to be the interconnector between the developing countries and between the south and north, between east and west.
The UN climate change high-level champion for COP29 told us that in addition to focusing on climate change, there is a need for active private sector involvement to achieve sustainable goals.
And when we speak about the green transition, we speak about the new types of economy overall. So the role of the private sector in the global climate action is absolutely crucial. It's so important because private sector is coming with technologies, with innovation, with I don't know, consumer behavior, so they can influence consumer behavior. So it's important to engage with private sector.
Experts say concrete results must be achieved in Baku in order to make progress toward the Paris Agreement's goals. Despite last year's gains, negotiations on the new climate targets have exposed divisions among countries. Meanwhile, the talks are unfolding in a very complex geopolitical scenario. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews, in Baku, Azerbaijan.
Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said he's willing to hold a confidence vote in Parliament before the end of the year after the ruling three-party coalition collapsed. In an interview on Sunday night with public broadcaster ARD, Scholz said, "I'm not glued to my post." He'd originally scheduled the vote for the 15th of January, but in the face of increasing pressure is now considering holding it this year, paving the way for snap elections. Scholz is widely expected to lose the vote. In that case, President Frank-Walter Steinmeier will have 21 days to dissolve the Bundestag, and fresh elections must take place within 60 days of Parliament's closure. Scholz also denied he'd provoked the coalition's collapse, saying he'd done everything he could to keep it together. The so-called traffic light coalition collapsed on the 6th of November after Scholz fired Finance Minister Christian Lindner. Speaking to the press at the time, Scholz said Lindner had broken his trust too many times. The coalition had been at odds for some time, particularly over economic and fiscal policy.
5 people have died and several injured following a Russian drone strike on Ukraine's southern city of Mykolaiv. The city's mayor, Alexander Senkevich, said Russia attacked overnight using kamikaze drones, destroying a house and damaging a residential building which set alight. Meanwhile, in Zaporizhzhia, 1 person has died and at least 21 wounded in 3 separate Russian strikes that damaged residential buildings. Residents are being evacuated and rescue operations are still ongoing. The attacks come as Russia launched its largest overnight drone strike on Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion, with Ukrainian air defences detecting a record 145 drones on Saturday night. Ukraine is continuing to return fire, launching a massive drone strike on Moscow and its suburbs overnight into Sunday.
Donald Trump's team has dismissed remarks by Republican strategists that the new administration's plan to end the war in Ukraine is about peace and not territory. In an interview with the BBC, Brian Lanza claimed that the incoming Trump government didn't see restoring lost territory as a priority. But a spokesperson for the president-elect said Lanza didn't speak for Trump. On the campaign trail, Trump claimed he could end the war in Ukraine within a day without explaining how. But he also hasn't ruled out the possibility that Kyiv may have to cede territory to Moscow to bring about an end to the war. Russia seized the Crimean Peninsula in 2024 and in 2022 annexed 4 areas of Ukraine without ever maintaining full control over any of them. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly said the full withdrawal of Russia's forces and the return of all territory is a must if peace is to be established.
US President-elect Donald Trump has announced that his former Director of Immigration Enforcement, Tom Homan, will serve as the border czar in his new administration. Homan was widely expected to be offered a position related to the border following Trump's pledge to launch the largest deportation operation in the country's history. Homan has told US media that ICE will move to implement Trump's plans in a humane manner.
Authorities in Valencia have ruled out any imminent resignations from the regional government as anger continues to grow over the response to catastrophic flooding. Thousands of people staged a protest on Saturday night accusing the regional government of sending out public warnings about the dangers of the flooding too slowly. A group of protesters demanding the resignation of regional president Carlos Mazon clashed with riot police in front of the city hall. The EFE news agency said at least 31 police officers were injured in the violence. But the region's vice president said no one would be stepping down, as to do so would be a betrayal of the victims. At least 222 people have been killed in Spain's worst natural disaster in decades. The flooding started after torrential rain lashed the eastern region of Valencia on the 29th of October, with some areas receiving a year's worth of rain in just 8 hours. The central government in Madrid has mobilized thousands of troops and police officers to help with relief and cleanup operations. And thousands of ordinary citizens have also stepped up to help, with no definite estimate as to exactly how many have come forward. The full extent of the damage is unknown, but Spain's Consortium for Insurance Compensation estimates that it will pay out at least €3.5 billion in compensation. Paris police have said that 4,000 officers will be deployed for a France versus Israel football match to ensure security a week after violence erupted in Amsterdam. France and Israel are playing in a UEFA Nations League match on Thursday that French President Emmanuel Macron will attend. Paris's police chief said that 2,500 officers would be deployed around the Stade de France stadium, in addition to 1,500 others around Paris and on public transportation. Laurent Nunez said an anti-terrorist security perimeter would be set up around the stadium and that police won't tolerate any violence. Nunez also said that French organisers have been in contact with Israeli authorities and security forces in order to prepare for the match. It comes after violence erupted in Amsterdam on Thursday following an Ajax versus Maccabi Tel Aviv game. Video circulating online ahead of the match showed a large crowd of Israeli fans chanting anti-Arab slurs on their way to the stadium. Afterwards, youths on scooters went in search of Israeli fans, punching and kicking them in attacks apparently inspired by calls on social media to target Jewish people. 5 people were treated at hospitals and dozens were arrested after the attacks, which were condemned as anti-Semitic by authorities in Amsterdam, Israel and across Europe. On Sunday, Dutch police detained several people for taking part in a demonstration in central Amsterdam that had been forbidden following the violence.
Riot police clashed with demonstrators at an anti-fascist march in Bologna on Saturday. Around 200 anarchists joined the 1,000 or so anti-fascist demonstrators. The march was organized by left-wing groups, near to where a far-right march was taking place against crime and what its organizers described as degradation in Italy. Police fired tear gas and blocked the streets where the far-right groups were marching. The demonstrations happened a week before elections are held in the Emilia-Romagna region. The current president of the regional government is Irene Priolo, who is from the centre-left. She took over from Stefano Bonaccini, who became a member of the European Parliament in July.